The young intern was late for a meeting but an old man. Asked for help crossing the street. She had no idea who he was. The freezing winter wind howled through the towering glass canyons of Manhattan. It was exactly 8:53 in the morning. At the intersection of 5th Avenue and 42nd Street, the city was a relentless blur of yellow cabs, screaming sirens, and rushing corporate suits. The avenue seemed utterly indifferent to the overwhelming panic rising in a young woman's chest. Sarah, a finance intern, is on her final day of her trial period to determine her permanent position. Above her, the pedestrian crosswalk sign began its unforgiving digital countdown. 12, 11, 10. Sarah stood at the very edge of the curb. She was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling in sharp, erratic rhythms. Her fingers gripped her smartphone so tightly that her knuckles turned a pale white. She stared at the glowing screen. The notification stared right back at her, making her stomach drop into an endless void. 8 missed calls, Miller. She was supposed to be inside the Vanguard company building right now. She was supposed to be setting up the presentation that would define her entire career. Instead, she was stuck out here on the freezing concrete. This morning, she overslept because she stayed up too late last night, editing the report, and was feeling anxious, preparing for today's presentation. To make matters worse, a pale brown coffee stain ruined the crisp collar of her only professional white shirt. She did not have the time to go back. She certainly did not have the money to buy a new one. Sarah did not cry. She did not panic. She reached into her heavy coat pocket and pulled out a plain white adhesive Band-Aid. With a swift, aggressive motion, she peeled off the backing and slapped the bandage directly over the coffee stain on her collar. It was not perfect. It looked slightly absurd, but it covered the mess. It made her look like she was in control. She was a survivor. You had to be if you wanted to make it in this city. The crosswalk timer hit 8 seconds. Sarah shifted her weight to her toes, ready to sprint the moment the traffic cleared. Suddenly, a freezing, trembling hand clamped down on her wrist. Sarah gasped and spun around. Standing right beside her was an old man. He looked to be well over 70 years old. His eyes did not focus on her. They were cloudy, darting around the intersection in sheer terror. He looked completely disoriented, visibly overwhelmed by the deafening roar of the morning traffic. His grip on her wrist was desperately tight, like a man holding on to a lifeline. "Could you?" The old man's voice was incredibly fragile, almost swallowed entirely by the noise of the street. "Could you help me cross?" He pointed a shaking, frail finger toward the opposite side of the avenue. "I just wanted to go over there, to buy flowers for my wife." Sarah snapped her gaze down to her wristwatch. It was 8:54. Her heart hammered violently against her ribs. If she did not run right this exact second, she would be late. She would miss the pitch. She stared at the old man's fragile hand gripping her coat. And then, for one agonizing, silent second, a cold and ruthless thought flashed through her mind. I have waited 4 years for this opportunity. What if I just let go of his hand right now? What if I just run? It was a dark thought, an incredibly selfish thought. But she was not a villain. She was simply a human being who was terrified of failing. Her family back home was drowning in debt. The rent for her tiny apartment was 3 weeks past due. If Vanguard Company did not hire her today, she was finished. She would have to pack her bags, leave New York, and admit total defeat. This was not just a good opportunity. This was her only way out. The digital timer above them ticked down relentlessly. 5, 4, 3. No one would judge her if she ran. No one would even notice. Sarah stared into the old man's cloudy, desperate eyes. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second and ground her teeth together. The survival instinct begged her to leave. Her conscience, however, anchored her feet to the pavement. "Okay." Sarah finally spoke. Her voice was tense, strained, and laced with rising panic. "Okay, but we need to move. Now." She did not let go. Instead, she adjusted her grip, wrapping her hand firmly and protectively around the old man's arm. Sarah stepped off the curb and descended into the chaotic street. She knew exactly what she was doing. As the cold wind hit her face, she knew with absolute certainty that she had just made the most important morning of her life infinitely harder. The asphalt of the crosswalk feels like an endless, freezing ocean. They are only halfway across the white zebra stripes. Arthur's steps